Perfect. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining our online practical CV workshop today. If you are familiar with any of our previous online events, you will know that we regularly provide CV tips and advice to our candidates. However, coming into 2021, we had a lot of requests from candidates, for example, CVs, and particularly in tailoring content within the CV as well. So we're holding this webinar, and rather than providing tips, it will be a practical run through of a CV document, the sections it should entail, and the contents of each section. The webinar we're going to have at around 10 to 15 minutes in length, quite a tight time frame, though we are aware that a lot of you are within a lunch break or in between commitments, so go and try and stick to those time frames as much as possible. Now, you may want to have your CV to hand as we go through. However, if you would rather listen and work on your CV later, then you will be provided with a full recording of this webinar once we finish. And we hope that from the workshop, you will then have a CV template that is really easily tailored towards any role that you are applying for going forward in the future. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Helena. Helena started as a candidate resourcer at Signature Recruitment before being promoted up to a client service executive, and works with CVs on a daily basis, receiving feedback from both candidates and our clients, and so hiring managers. And having that experience on both sides of the coin makes her perfectly placed to take us through this workshop today. So thanks so much for your time, Helena. And although in the 10 to 15 minutes we won't be holding a Q&A session, I do invite anyone who would have a specific question to email us directly, and certainly a member of our team would be really happy to help. Okay, so that being said, over to you, Helena.
Thanks, Rach. Hi guys. So as Rachel mentioned, today we are going to run through a CV document in a specific format. So we're just going to get it up on the in this specific format that's going to come up. Amazing. So this is an overview of the document as a whole. We'll start off initially with the profile and key skills sections. These are two of the most important sections, which is why they are at the top of the document, followed by experience and education. Two sections which would quite obviously be apparent on every CV document. So let's dive into each of those sections, starting off with our profile section. We always start our CVs off with the profile section, and what this includes is a brief summary of yourself, the objectives of your job search, and why you are applying for this specific role. The reason we have this profile section is that the roles that we work on, and a lot of the roles out there now, don't even accept a cover letter. We've kind of moved away from that in recruitment a little bit. So if you take that document away, you are losing some valuable information on your previous experience and motivations for applying for the role. Just to give you an idea of length, we are looking at around 3 to 5 sentences. It doesn't need to be any longer. It can be if there are key things that you would like to include, but 3 to 5 sentences is kind of like the perfect length. Your profile is the first thing that a client is going to read, so it sets the tone for the rest of your CV. Before I give you the first example, all of the examples that we're going to cover throughout this workshop are for the scenario of a recruitment consultant applying for a managerial position in recruitment. We will also be covering some guidance on how to tailor your profile and other sections of your CV when applying it to a different role. So this consultant's profile reads, a professional and competent recruitment consultant with 10 years experience working in the higher education sector. With excellent communication skills, I have the ability to build and maintain long-lasting stakeholder relationships. I pride myself on meeting deadlines, often working accurately under pressure. For my next career step, I'd like to manage an ambitious team and contribute towards overall company objectives. I hope that you can see from this example that this profile includes a brief summary of the individual and their skill set, what the objectives of their job search are, and why they are interested in that managerial role. Now, if you were to look at this profile and wanted to tailor it for a managerial role, not particularly in recruitment, but maybe in retail, for example, it's important to remember that they are still a recruitment consultant, so that experience doesn't change. And a managerial role in retail is quite different. So we might want to look at the skills that are mentioned, the sector that is mentioned, and the objectives. So we might change the first sentence, which mentions 10 years experience working in the higher education sector, to 10 years experience working in a fast-paced environment, because like recruitment, retail is also very fast-paced. Then we would look at the skills. So I might want to change the part about stakeholder relationships to something customer service based, maybe that would be better suited to retail. I might also decide that my objective would stay the same, or you could change your objective to say that the objective is to change sectors for X, Y, and Z reasons. So now that we have our profile down, let's move on to the next section. The second section is the key skills section. This is basically a shopping list of the skills that a client will be looking for in that role. I personally work with clients on a day-to-day basis, and even when they hand a job over to me, they give me a list of requirements for that specific role. And if they're looking at someone's CV and see that list within the profile, within the skills section, before they even look at your previous experience, it's likely that that you would go forward in that process. So this key skills section would include a combination of hard skills, such as qualifications or systems that you've previously used, or even an example from your previous role. So for example, if you were a PA in your previous role, you might have done minute taking in meetings, which is now a skill set that you now have. As well as soft skills, which are more like personality traits. So like being organized and timekeeping and skills like that. As a general rule, we do like to think of at least 3 hard skills and 3 soft skills that are specifically applicable to the role that you are applying for. For example, this recruitment consultant applying for a managerial role might have the following skills: people management, sickness, lateness, and review process, stakeholder engagement skills, Microsoft Office and CRM knowledge, working well under pressure and to a deadline, attention to detail, for example, processing weekly payroll, and producing reports on a weekly and monthly basis. If we were now going to go forward for a managerial role in retail, it is important to tailor those skills specifically to that role from reading the job specification. So instead of saying you have a high attention to detail for processing weekly payroll, you could say you have a high attention to detail in analyzing sales figures. So we don't want to change everything. We just want to make it more relevant to the role that you are applying for. The profile and the key skills sections are probably the most important sections that you want to tailor, because they are the first thing that the client reads, and employment history and education won't really change much because the companies that you've worked at and your qualifications will always remain the same. The next section is your experience section. And this section does exactly what it says. It's going to explain your experience. So this is a timeline of your previous work experience, and it should be clear what you were doing in the gaps between job roles. So if you were traveling, make sure to include that on your CV. Each job role should include the company name, your job title, the correct dates of when you worked there, as well as bullet points of what you did on a day-to-day basis. The reason why we use bullet points is because it's easier to read and it is more to the point, but it also helps with tailoring. Because a lot of people might have important pros on their CV in this section, if it's written in a paragraph, you would have to rewrite the paragraph for each role that you're applying for. If it's in bullet points, it's easier to tweak a bullet point, move it up to the top of the list for relevancy, and reorder it rather than having to rewrite the whole section. The bullet points that most describe the role you're applying for and the most relevant should always be at the top. It does also help to elaborate where possible. For example, if one of the points was data entry, you could say, carrying out data entry on client records with a high attention to detail in line with data protection laws. So based on what I've just said, we've included an example for a recruitment consultant applying for a managerial role. So even if this candidate was going forward for a role in retail, I would think that anything people or service related would be at the top of the list. Make sure also to include all of your roles. Don't make a decision on what roles are relevant or not. The myth about how long your CV should be is just a myth. The final section is the education section. And similarly to experience, where you have been educated and the qualifications that you've achieved will always be the same. Make sure you include all of the dates that you achieved these qualifications, as well as the grades. Now, you've worked really hard for these qualifications, so don't sell yourself short. So include any achievements, awards, or extracurricular activities, like being part of a committee or part of a society that also could be relevant to the role. It is a general rule that the more experienced you get, the less prevalent your education achievements need to be, but it will always be a fact that you achieved that education or that qualifications, and that will always remain the same and relevant on your CV. So that will take us top to bottom through a CV. If you want to include any other elements, definitely do if it's relevant. For example, we have people going forward for a publishing role who might want to include their interest in books. One thing I would recommend is not having a references section. You will always be given the opportunity to provide references throughout the recruitment process, so it doesn't need to take up space on your CV document. To summarize, you are going to have your experience in education, which will largely remain the same and can be formatted in a way that is more relevant to the role that you're applying for. But the majority of your tailoring is going to go into your profile and skills section. Before you attempt this work of tailoring towards the role that you are applying for, make sure to check out the person specification on the job description, because that will have all the information you need to put relevant tailoring into your profile and skills. I am quite mindful of time. We did say we'd be about 10-15 minutes, so I think we'll wrap it up then.
Thanks, Elena. Your insight and your guidance is much appreciated. So thank you so much. And I'm hoping that everyone from this brief workshop will be able to produce a CV template that can be easily tailored for what you're going forward for in the future. Now, if you would be interested in any of our live vacancies that we're working on at the moment, I'd like to direct you to our website, signaturerecruitment.co.uk, and that is for opportunities available in London and Bristol. Finally, I wanted to reiterate that if anyone did have a question concerning this webinar, please contact us directly at signatureteam@signaturerecruitment.co.uk, and a member of our team would be delighted to help you out. And with that being said, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye.